Hey everyone, welcome to the Keep 'em Healthy podcast. This is your host, Jamie. We are locked in on season 4. This season is going to be full of curiosity, learning, and great conversation. If this show is helpful to you, please share these episodes and follow this podcast on your podcast apps. Thank you so much for listening. Let's get this conversation started. Hey listeners, so originally we were going to be joined by both Russ, Romano, and Dan Kusters, but because of some technical difficulties, we will only be joined by Dan Kusters today. So Dan Kusters and Russ Romano, they are mental performance coaches and the owners of D1 Mindset Coaching. They are both former D1 baseball players and attribute competitive sports to a lot of their success in business and life. The company D1 Mindset works with athletes, athletic programs, teams, and professional organizations to help master the mental side of peak performance and developing culture and leadership skills. You know, as parents, we spend a lot of time focusing on the physical skills to get our kids to improve in their practices, their games, their private lessons. But what D1 Mindset is teaching are the critical soft skills. So allowing them to reach their full potential by building confidence, focus, resilience, and self-control so that the physical skill sets can shine when it matters most. I'm really excited about this conversation. Dan does a great job. And Russ, we will have you back very soon. In the meantime, please check out my show notes and check out what D1 Mindset Coaching is doing. And if you are interested in having them come to help your child or your program or your school, you can use the links. Let's get this conversation going. I would love to begin. The whole point of this episode is to teach parents and coaches and teachers ways to help build confidence in their students and athletes. So what do you say to those parents when they come to you and they're like, I just wish my kid had confidence? Like, what's step one? Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, so step one is your daily habits. And it is what kind of discipline do you have, regardless of feeling, regardless of emotion, is what is it that I'm doing daily? And those daily routines is what you're able to find that comfort in and that trust in and that belief with those daily routines. And some of that is how are you training, how are you practicing? And part of it is putting yourself in very difficult, challenging situations in practice. And that's where you develop that trust and the belief in yourself because you've done it in the training. So when you step into the actual game environment, it's now just time to execute because you've done the drill. You've actually trained to a certain level where you're comfortable being in that environment. And that's where the confidence is going to stem from. So that the first part is that daily discipline and the habits. And what key component is to tell yourself what to think. Don't listen to your mind, but tell your mind, tell your body how it's going to perform and how it's going to act. You don't want to listen. You want to dictate how that's going to go. There are two key components. And again, they're skills. That's something that happens arbitrary. Somebody might have a slightly better talent in that than another person, but it's daily working on those skills, pounding on those skills so that when you step into an environment where it's time to execute, you've already developed them and you're able to put them into practice.
And so this is important for the parents listening too, because we are thinking, okay, I want our kids to have confidence, but we have to remember that we have a responsibility and a role in that confidence as well. Yes, the kids as well have to, show up, do the work, and then also have the self-talk, but it's the parents as well. And so I can totally relate to that because there have been times where I project onto the court what I think my child should be doing, what I know the potential of my child is. And then when they don't do the said thing or act the said way, we get upset and our body language and our voice changes. And I have had multiple conversations afterwards with apologizing to my kids to be like, I got caught up in the moment. But my question is for you, actually, from that example is, can you give parents like a go-to, you see your child having the posture of defeated or having that bad game? What would be the one line that you would advise the parent, like the first thing to say to their kid when they're coming off of that court or field? Right.
So with my baseball organization, I go through a whole process of, and this is where Russ and I met when he was presenting to my baseball organization on mental performance and mindset, is parents need coaching as well. And I know it's very difficult to divorce yourself from your DNA when they're performing. I think some of this is they need to understand their role. And I say with my parents jokingly, tongue in cheek, your job is to be a spectator, not to be a spectacle. We're not watching you. You're watching, and you should be cheering everybody on because the game is very difficult. whether it's your child or another child on the team or another child on the other team. I even jokingly say, hey, if I'm coaching third base and I make a great play, like, cheer me on, because that's the energy that you want in the ethos. That's the atmosphere you want to have when your kid's performing. And then I'll follow up, like when your son strikes out. And of course, like Russ and I talk baseball because that's our background, playing at advanced levels. Is your son okay with a strikeout? We've talked through the process of how striking out's part of the game. My question is, Mom and Dad, are you okay with the strikeout? Because when I look down, I can see your discomfort and your unrest with your son's experience and him not performing the way that you feel that he should. And I don't mean this like jokingly. You should tell your child that you love them. As soon as they come off the field, number one, that's the first thing you got to share with your child is how much you care about them. So that's first and foremost.
I appreciate that, because I think that parents do need to be coached, because we're human beings. We've never had, maybe this is the first time having a child on a baseball field and having this excitement relationship going on here. And so we've never had to experience, like, to watch your child play a sport is the greatest thing you get to see. It's so exciting. It's so much fun. And you never knew how much you love that sport until your kids start playing it. Right. And so you get hyped up, which is amazing, but we have to know how to use that energy for a positive experience for not just our kid, but also the other parents and the other kids on the court or field, because we've seen things where it has become very toxic because it's not positive energy. And so can you speak to the ramifications of when we don't follow a positive role model type of parenting and sideline approach?
Yeah, it could be cataclysmic. We've had players in our experience with my academy, and Russ now helping other families through the process, is when a player hits 13, 14, 15 years old, they want nothing to do with the sport anymore because they can't escape the stressors. It's on the field, it's off the field, it's in the car ride home, it's at the dinner table, it's when they wake up in the morning. Instead of it being the player's ambition and the player's interest, it becomes the parent's ambition and the parent's interest. Instead of supporting and giving your child the resources, you are the one that's participating in the sport itself instead of supporting your child who's in that sport. There's a very powerful stat for the amount of players when you hit 13 years old that are completely done with quote unquote competitive sports. They'll do very recreational. They'll do much less stress free, and it's because of the anxiety and the stressors. And that's endemic of, I think, our culture, is that when you hit 13, 14, things get much more stressful. So our job is to eliminate those stressors and give them the environment and the family culture, but also the team culture and that leadership that allows them to be in a very safe place to take big risks and to be successful. You want them to be ambitious on the field and on the pitch and on the diamond and on the court. You don't want them to be conservative. You want them to feel like they're able to take risks because it's not an easy competition. You don't want them to be passive while they're out there. And that comes from that trust, that comes from the love, the caringness, the unconditional love, whether they win or they lose, it doesn't matter.
Can we speak to the culture, the stress culture, that especially in where we live, there's a lot of emphasis on sports. And at the age of 13, which I have children that are at that age, I hear a lot of talk coming from them, not from my husband and I, but coming from them, that I really need to figure out what my one sport is and lock in on that now that I'm going to go to high school next year. I need to know my one sport. And I say to them, like, why do we have to pick one sport? You're 13 and you enjoy multiple sports. What's going on here? And I feel like there's a pressure to pick one sport. Is that something that you've heard of or experienced as well? And do you think that's causing a lot of the stressors for these kids?
It's definitely part of the culture, especially where we are.
Yeah.
It's part of the culture because sports used to be very seasonal. So baseball was March through end of June or July. Yeah. And then soccer, football, then lacrosse came, or field hockey became very popular. And then in the winter, you had basketball, you had wrestling, you had swimming in the wintertime. Right. And you could definitely have it compartmentalized. But now there's an opportunity to play playing sports all year long. And it doesn't necessarily matter. It could be, flag football. You can play that year long. You can play like recreational soccer all year long. So some of it is that there's now the opportunity to do that. And some of it is that there is either perceived or real stressors and expectations that you are training year round. Now, I think you should be preparing year round, either doing some sort of conditioning, some sort of mental performance, managing strength. I mean, if you want to change your game, change your body, get in great shape. But I don't know if you necessarily need to be playing that sport year round. Plus, also, like, your body does need rest. And I know, like taking off when I played, we played soccer in the fall and basketball in the winter. They were some of my favorite sports because they were just so different than baseball. That your body needs to train and condition, plus your view of the game. If I understand the strategy in soccer and also in basketball, it does transfer and translate to being successful regarding the IQ and also the EQ that you have on the baseball diamond as well. I think, though, once you get to high school, sometimes the perception is, in order for me to make this JV team and make the varsity team, I need to be very myopic. I need to focus on one sport. I need to lock in on that. And I think the reality is coaches want kids that are very, very competitive, kids that are very disciplined, and kids that are great athletes. I don't know if they really care so much about the sports, just playing football or basketball or baseball. They want guys that can do those three things because they're difference makers when you get into really competitive environments. Kids that are athletic, kids that are coachable, and kids that are disciplined, and the kids that are very athletic. It allows you to be successful. And that's my experience coaching in high school and also coaching at college.
And so even preparation means, like, for example, preparation is being on that basketball team when you play baseball and using that opportunity to figure out how this translates and how this is going to help my body and keep my body safe and safe from injury because I'm giving it rest and I'm learning these different tactics. I coached a basketball team and half of my team was soccer players, kids that play soccer all year round. They were amazing. Why? They knew spacing. They knew how to cover. They knew how to respond to a ball coming off of the backboard. Why? Because they do the same thing in soccer, right? They have to respond and they have to space the floor, right? You can't all crowd. And it was amazing. And I remember being like, oh, I just assumed that my team wasn't going to be that great because we were just having soccer players come play because for fun, right? Turns out we made it to the championship. Why? Because they were athletes. Just like you're saying, Dan, they were athletes and they knew how to be on a field and be a part of a team. And so that is super, super important. So I really appreciate that you said that. And I hope all the listeners are hearing that because attitude and being an athlete and knowing how to use that and work the field or court wherever you're on is huge.
There's also a correlation. When you have some of the smaller schools in suburbia, you're going to have the athletes who have really good fall seasons and they play a winter sport. You'll see the winter sports teams also have really nice seasons frequently. And the seasons that have the teams that play winter sports also play spring sports. You'll see them have really nice seasons. And I've seen the correlation between, let's just use like some of the larger sports teams that have really good basketball seasons. Their basketball teams do really well because some of the linemen are also playing on the basketball team. And then you see some of the guys on the basketball team who have really good seasons also happen to play shortstop, catcher, and pitcher on the baseball team. And the baseball team, it's now part of the culture. It's now part of their DNA. And it does transfer. It does translate. And when you take a look at, as you get older and the competition gets much more significant and that funnel gets tighter and tighter regarding the caliber of players, the separators are the mental performance. It's how you prepare and how you recover from failure. That is, and also the grittiness, the competitiveness. And the truth is, Jamie, when you take a look at us as adults, managing our kids and also helping our kids, helping our parents, helping ourselves and our spouse, that gritty, the separators are the grittiness, coming back from difficulties, coming back from failure. So like when Russ and I talk about it, and that's part of our vocation, is that mental performance is not singular to just a diamond or a court or a field. It's the classroom. It's how do you deal with relationships? Like how do you deal with anything outside of the academic environment? It all comes into play. And those skills are transferable for the rest of your life. And that's what's really exciting about this and the mental performance part.
I think I absolutely agree on that take as well. And we had mentioned in our discovery call about the hard skills versus the soft skills. Yeah. And the soft skills are what you and Russ are really honing in on to help make that athlete really go beyond just being a normal athlete to the elite athlete. And so you mentioned grittiness. I love that word. What does that mean to you?
It is definitely something that is trained. Again, and when you take a look at talent may be your DNA. It's what you were gifted when you came into this world. And some people may have better talent than others, but then your skill is what you hone and you pound on every day with your daily discipline. You get 1% better every day. And the grittiness is also part of that skill set. And it relates to the very first question that we talked about, Jamie, when we were talking with Russ. We were talking about that confidence and having that courage. So grittiness is understanding this is going to be a difficult experience, but I'm doing it anyway. This is going to be hard, but I'm doing it anyway. And that I'm doing it anyway is the grittiness that actually gets built like any other muscle. And that transfers from, all right, I'm here, I'm a wrestler. Okay. And that's a gritty sport. And that translates into being gritty in competing in the collegiate level and in the business world. And that's understanding what's your self-talk and being having those positive words while you're walking yourself through that process. But also when you fail, how quickly are you able to recover? And instead of reacting emotionally, you respond with a very specific purpose. And that's part of the training process. Again, some players are very talented at that. And other players need guidance and mentorship and leadership to go through that grittiness. And you mentioned also, I know that this is another vertical that we can easily talk about, is now with AI becoming so much more prevalent and AI dominating so much of the hard skills, the things that we're talking about now are not just soft skills, they are the hardest skills to replicate with AI. The grittiness, the self-awareness, the mental performance, the emotional connections, situational awareness, empathy, like that's so difficult for AI to replicate that. They are the hardest skills. And that's part of the mental performance. That's part of just creating leaders, young people who are going to be our leaders for tomorrow. These are the skills that I think are going to be those huge separators, Jamie, for things that our kids that we don't even know what that's going to be just yet. 5 years, 7 years, 10 years. We don't even know what the environment's going to be, business is going to be, the world's going to be, and those skills are going to be the ones I think are the significant separators.
There's the people that are going to be able to show up and say, I don't really know if I'm going to be successful at this, but I'm going to do it anyway. That showing up, whether it's in the lower stakes of like intramural basketball, or if it's, showing up to being like, I have to provide for my family, but this is how I got to do it. And I'm not just going to like dig a hole and hide because I don't know if I'm good enough. Right. Leadership is something that I've been honing in on, coaching a volleyball team right now. And there's a lot of girls with like we're talking about the hard skills. They have that on lockdown because they're on club teams. They do all these practices through the summer. And so what I am emphasizing, and I said, what I want from you is I want that leadership. I want you, doing the cheers. I want you giving encouragement after a failed play. I want you to be on the bench and be 100% engaged, even when you're on the bench in the game, right? Those are things that don't come easily to these kids, right? Because when they're on the bench, they just want to like look to the side and not talk to anybody, or they're trying to like reach behind and maybe see if they can catch a glimpse of their phone, that kind of stuff. So it's not easy for these kids.
No. Jamie, if I can speak to that, because when Russ and I started talking about this, Russ was talking about the mental performance, and I'm sitting like, I do that with my baseball academies teams and also the coaches. But at the core of mental performance is being a leader for yourself daily with your conversation, daily discipline, understanding your habits, understanding your routines. And if you are not able to lead yourself, there's nobody else that's going to want to follow you as well. So when I talk to my coaches, I discuss with them, like, you are the culture, you are the leaders, and therefore you must, at the end of the day, when you look at yourself and you do your journal and you brush your teeth and then you kind of reflect on your day, were you a leader that you would follow? If I wouldn't follow myself, how am I going to get 12 kids, 15 kids to get an academy or a team or an organization or a family or a business to follow me? And also, sometimes the things we talk about are so like abstract and nebulous, like, all right, focus.
Right.
On what? Like, where do I focus? All right, be confident. Confident on what? This picture's really good, or this guy can score on me. Like, it's a skill. So what does it mean to be a leader? And a lot of times people have no idea what it means to be a leader. And it's great that you brought it up, because I've been doing the last 5 years of my life really focusing on what leadership is. And there's a whole cultural machine that leadership creates. And it goes leadership, create standards, and your standards. So it's the floor of your standard and also the ceiling of your standard. You raise your floor and the ceiling. That's my standard. The standards then create your culture. The culture creates protocols and procedures. Protocols and procedures create actions. Actions create habits. Habits is where success lives. So if you're ever wondering, like, how do I become a leader? Well, I can tell not by your words, but I can see in your actions every day, in your habits. That's what leaders do really, really, really well. It's not an email. It's not a video that you send. It's how you interact, how you communicate. The standard that you live by, that creates the leadership. And young people don't necessarily understand that. So that's where you need the mentorship to guide them through that process. And that's been my passion. And that's why Russ and I came together. It's the same concept. It's just being delivered where it's now enmeshed. The mental performance and the leadership now overlap.
I like that, because even for me, when you talk about that, we are the walking message of the leadership that you want from your players or your kids.
Yes.
And that goes across the board, again, across the board into parenting, into your work, wherever you are, right? So the other side of that is what it really resonated with me was when you said you have to be specific of what you want these players to do. So to say focus or to just say be confident, right, to them, that like bounces off their face and like goes nowhere, because that means nothing to them, because they don't even understand what even confidence feels like, whatever it is. Do we even fully understand? Who knows, right? So I love that. I think it's like to say, whatever it is, swing through, or to get down and ready, or something like that, where it's more of an action of telling them what to do.
Yes.
And that also goes with the way of coaching, to say, you don't want to tell your child what you don't want them to do. You want to tell them what you do want them to do.
So your brain can't understand the negative. So I'm going to draw another analogy. Like, so say a pitcher is struggling and you can't find the strike zone. You'll hear people yell like, just throw strikes. Okay, that's of course what I'm trying to do. I'm called the pitcher. I'm pitching the ball, so I'm trying to throw strikes. But then you hear like, don't walk them. So you hear don't walk them. You're hearing do not, which is a negative reference. And then you hear walk them. So you have this negativity. And again, people just don't know. It's really just empty rhetoric. It has no substance to it at all. It's just like these abstract words. So instead of, don't walk them, so do you actually train using these words? And the training part that's the preparation. And that's where you don't fall to the level of your competition. You fall to the level of your preparedness and your preparation. So if you prepare, hey, we're going to go 3 balls, no strikes on the batter. And all I'm going to say is pound the zone, compete. You're pounding the zone and competing. So that's the same words you use in the middle of the game. Hey, pound the zone, compete. Okay, we've gone through this process. That's part of it. Also, part of that confidence and that leadership in your actions are like, do you have a way to refocus yourself when things don't go your way? There are controllables and there are the uncontrollables. How do you reset yourself from the uncontrollables and you control your breathing? We talk about our 3-step release that recenters ourselves of where we need to be, because that's all that we can really control. You can't control a referee. You can't control your teammates. You can't control the field. You can't control the lighting. You can't control the people in the stands. I can't control those things. Any energy that's given to these things on the sides detract from your opportunity to really focus on the things and develop the things that you're able to control. And that's, again, part of that mental performance. That's part of the leadership. That's part of habit building. And again, like, I don't need you to send me a document that has your constitution, Jamie. I could just see how you behave and how you interact with people. That's your standard. And your standard is your culture, and they're your habits. Like, that's the leadership. Whether you are a positive leader or you're a leader that creates unrest, I can just see how you interact with people, how you interact with the referee, the umpire, the parents, your players, after a good inning, after a bad inning. Like, that's leadership manifested. I don't need you to write it down. I can just see it.
It speaks so true. You can see from a mile away the coaches that are maybe having more of a toxic environment of just being negative and unhappy. And you're like, stop doing that to those kids. Like, you're not nice, but just as quickly you could be that parent as well. And you get lost in it. So I understand it, but I think that comes down to parents and coaches, our preparation. I know we're helping to prepare these athletes for what they're going on to the field of court for, but we have to prepare ourselves. We have to know where we stand before we go and help them be a part of this program, whatever they're doing. So that's really good thoughts to think about. And for me as a coach, I have to, before you even start the season, what is my standard? How am I showing up? If I really want leadership, what does that need to look like? And taking that time to map that out, and then showing the girls and then having language to verbalize that to them. That's like next level too. But it's so important because it matters. So the language that you tell them matters of how they're going to absorb it and how they're going to follow through with it. I love this.
So part of this also, Jamie, is like, I know coaching your son, your child, your DNA is very difficult because there's so much that's existing beneath the surface. Like, I coached my son when he was 8 years old, and I try to almost like be aloof because I didn't want any nepotism or politicking, number one. Number two, I have a responsibility to the other 11 kids on the team, and I don't want, hey, you didn't make your bed this morning, and you weren't being nice to your sister and you talk back to mom, I don't want that bubbling to the surface of my interacting with him on the diamond. So, and so much of our life is like, let's understand how we're going to communicate and how this is going to go. Because once you communicate, you create extreme transparency. So if I say this is how it's going to go and you communicate, and then your behavior, your habits follow with that, you become a very authentic, trustworthy person. So like when we're talking to our children and we say, hey, let's communicate. This is how I'm going to handle a situation. You follow it. They're like, you know what, Dad, you were right. How you said, and and you become, there's a bond that's created. And when you speak to them about here's how the game's going to go, here's how the event's going to go, and you communicate everything. So there's nothing hidden, nothing abstract. And then you exercise that. They're like, okay, everything that you said came true, and they trust you. All I want to know, like I still use my GPS when I'm driving to the same location I've been to every time. Why? Because I like to know where I'm going, and I want to make sure there's no uncertainties. And especially with my child, I want to make sure there's no uncertainties. So when you actually are transparent and you share everything, and parents are like, oh, wow, Coach DeLuca is so honest and genuine. And, she's authentic. Coach Dan's so authentic. Coach Russ is so authentic. They trust you. And when they have trust, there's a great book called The Speed of Trust. It allows you to really develop players and then challenge them and push them. But until you have that connection and that trust, it's really tough to do that correction. Like you can't just have this interaction that's, hey, you're not doing things well. You have to truly connect. And they do. They need to know that you're vested and that that you care about them. And when parents see that, they're like, okay, I'm on board and I'm ready to go. And it allows things to be so much more successful. So that's a big component of it, that transparency, that communication, and that trust that you develop.
Absolutely. And to do what you say, not just say what you say and do something different, again, goes beyond, transcends,
Yes.
just being that relationship beyond your kid on the court. And so it is important to do what you say and not just say things and then do opposite, right? Mm-hmm. And I also think there's something that you said about you liking to use the GPS so that you know where you're going. Kids love structure. They love knowing where they're going. They love knowing that, okay, I just hit this ball and made it to first, and I know that Coach Dan is going to give me a thumbs up, whatever. I know that I actually struck out. I know Coach Dan's going to give me a thumbs up and say like, okay, we're going to get it next time. I know we're going to work on, it's okay. Let's keep it going. Right. Like that consistency and that trust is that it comes with time, with the words and then the actions, and then repeating it over and over again. And the kids really do well with that, because if they're unsure that Coach Dan is going to blow up on them because they didn't make it to second, or who knows what it would be, it's a terrifying place for a kid to be in. Terrifying. Yes. And some people take that as, well, that's passion. I want them to be their best. But I don't know. What do you say with that type of perspective?
A significant part about this is also, what is it that you want to applaud? And you may have, and again, just let's use baseball because that's Russ's my background. A kid could have 4 hits and he hasn't done anything well. So are you applauding the product or are you applauding the process? Whereas you can have a player that's over 4 and took incredibly great swings. That's part of the process that you have to applaud. Another example would be, and I've seen this happen, is a batter would take a super aggressive swing and swing and miss, and the ball might be way out of the strike zone. So think about the narrative that you want to create and you want to support. Are you going to yell, what are you swinging at? Okay, now you have a timid player that's now fearful and is not going to swing at the next pitch because you just reprimanded him. As opposed to, hey, love the game swing, way to be aggressive. I love the aggressive swing. Let's look at pitch selection a little bit, something that you can do a little more damage with. So you didn't rip out the intent to be really aggressive. You're just honing it and giving it a very specific focus when they're being aggressive. And again, you have to raise your gaze a little bit. I'm not looking at the immediacy of this. I'm actually going to raise my gaze above it. And as leaders, we need to do that. We need to move beyond the immediate impact of things and understand where the process is going to take us. And once we do that, you're now developing those habits. And I mentioned, before we jumped on the call, like your habits precede success. I might be working out and dieting and exercising, and I'm like, I don't feel any better. And then 6 months, 9 months, 12 months later, like, wow, I'm actually. So as leaders, we need to have that skill set to be able to look around the corner from where we are immediately. And we have to be able to communicate that with parents. And that is, again, an important component, because a parent might be like, why aren't you yelling at him for certain things? And if you articulate and explain it why, like, here's why I'm not yelling. Like, it's not passion. I'm actually losing. I want to be an oak. I want to be resounding element of calmness because the game is so difficult and kids don't have their frontal lobe development yet. So those part of that is getting like a little bit of unrest with that as well. I want to be that calming element for that. The parents need to hear that and kids need to hear that as well regarding this is what good leadership is and this is what good coaching is. If you do need to have that conversation with the player, I think that's done in confidence. So you critique in confidence and you praise publicly. I think that's a good model to have as well because we're talking about that leadership. But again, that also relates to the head coach having that EQ and having strong mental performance for that coach himself. Like, does he have a 3-step release? Has he focused on how he wants to handle difficult situations? Has he gone through that visualization and that mental imagery of how I want to handle those situations? And coaches frequently don't polish those skills as well.
Which leads me to why I am so happy about what you and Russ are doing.
Yeah.
Because it is so important. It's next level thinking that is so important to have for these kids who are growing up in a totally different world than we grew up in. And these skills are so important. And so Dan and Russ, who we lost a bit ago, which is okay. Russ, we miss you. We'll catch you next time. But Dan, if you can continue just to let us know a little bit what you and Russ are doing right now and how that if any parent or coach is listening, how we can get in contact with you.
Yeah. So we're D1 Mindset. D1 Mindset Coaching and D1 Coaching. It is, you can find us on all of our social media handles, and we are just updating our website to better represent what our services are and how we can help people. And there's different components to it. And one is we can do one-on-one coaching with players, which is a big part of that. But then there's the whole team coaching. So you have a team of 10, 15, 20 players. So you have an entire team culture. And this is where then you start moving into the leadership part, because if you don't have the coaches on board with what the players are trying to do, they can upend all that development that you've had. So the coaches have to be on board with that as well. And then we're able to help out entire organizations with the leadership and mental performance. And that also then relates to athletic departments in high schools and colleges. And then we're also talking to businesses because, as we know, the skills that you have here are the ones that help you deal with being resilient, mental preparedness, and getting ready for what's going on in the business world. So there's all these different components, and we've got tremendous feedback from people in business, from local organizations, local schools, local sports programs, individuals that we're working with, that all these are extreme value, and people are having great results from that.
Awesome. And also, listeners, I will attach all of this information to the show notes, so you can go on there and hit the links, and it'll take you right to their accounts. So Dan and Russ, for wherever you are, thank you so much for coming on the show and for sharing your passion and your expertise. And parents and coaches and listeners, I hope that you can take away some really good insights and really help to build leaders and confident players on your team. Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, Jamie. Thanks for having us on the show.